we gave yesterday, you realize that we are dealing with the death of a young man who was discovered Saturday evening. We had a news conference yesterday asking for the public's help so we could identify this child. And right now, that is the number one point of this investigation, to find out who this child is. At this point, we still do not have that information. So despite the numerous news articles and TV coverage and social media posts, we don't have that answer. And that is our number one goal at this point, is to find out the identity and the name of this child. And he deserves, to be heard. So that's what we're asking the public's help. We're continuing to ask for the public's help to keep this at the forefront so that we can get that call. Obviously, this is a 5 to 8 year old young man. Somebody was taking care of him. He was in somebody's custody and care for his daily needs and for support. And we still haven't received any information about a child that's missing, that hasn't been accounted for, that would match his description. So we're asking for the public's help again to keep this going. Somebody out there either knows and isn't saying something, or just hasn't had the opportunity to see this in the media yet, and they don't know that they need to call somebody. So again, it's of vital importance that, first of all, the number one point of this case at this point is just to identify him. And that's why we need your help. To help with that, we have received numerous tips and calls, social media contacts, things like that in the past 24 hours. We ask that if you do have information, our social media is not the way to contact us for a tip. That's not monitored 24/7. There's lots of different avenues to contact us that way that could be overlooked. So we ask that you use the tip line. We do now have a dedicated tip line just for this investigation. That tip line is 1-888-437-6432. I'll repeat that, 1-888-437-6432, and that is a national 1-800 number. So we do have our own 800 number here to the post, but it only works within the state of Indiana. This number is a nationwide number that anybody can call and give us information. So we ask that if you have a tip, if you have a possibility, if you have information that you feel like you need to relay to one of the investigators, that you use that number, because that way we can track everything. We can make sure that everything is looked at in the proper way and nothing's overlooked. So please, we stress that you use that number, and if you can, as far as your broadcast, if you can put that graphic up there, obviously nice and big and bold so people see that. Also, we've received numerous calls and contacts reference a young man by the name of Cody Bigsby, who's missing from the Hampton, Virginia area. We realize that a lot of people, based on the information that we put out, that could be a possible match. It could be a possible match, but we have been in contact with the Hampton Police Department that's working that investigation. To this point, we don't believe that's going to be a match, but that is still being looked into. So again, we're crossing every T and dotting every I. So until we have a specific information to say, no, that's not him, but we're not being led in that direction to believe that that's going to be a match. So lots of people have sent us that tip. Lots of people sent us the graphics for that. You don't need to do that anymore. We obviously or definitely looked into that, and numerous others that are on the websites for missing children. We've contacted many state agencies, local agencies, federal agencies, as well as working with other federal agencies on this investigation, offering assistance. So we're looking at lots of different avenues, pretty much anything we can. We had originally said that we thought possibly this would be something from the local area as far as the young man's residence. But because nothing's happened, we've been in contact with schools and other agencies in this area looking for somebody who maybe didn't show up that was expected to be there. We haven't had any matches or anything to show up that would answer that question. So obviously, this could obviously be a national thing. So it could be a child from any location. We're not going to preclude anybody, and we're going to look at any information that comes in that could answer the question as to the identity of this child. At this point, again, we don't have anything new. We just want to get that information out there. People to please use that 1-800 number, and just know that we're not going to stop looking until we find these answers. Somebody, again, was taking care of this little boy. He's 5 to 8 years old. He's obviously not taking care of himself. somebody knows something. Somebody out there knows the answer to this question, and they're either choosing not to come forward with that information, or the right person just hasn't heard this information. So we ask that you please spread the word so that we can identify this young man and give him a voice. Also have today with me Detective Matt Busick, who's working diligently on the investigation. So if you have any questions for Detective Busick or myself, you can go ahead.
Yeah, given your just history in law enforcement, especially when it deals with cases like this, just kind of talk about the urgency of how fast you guys need information, because we keep going on day after day after day.
Yeah, anything we can get, the quicker we can get, it's going to help greatly. For a case like this is anything like any officer wants to work, but we are trying to work through it. But yeah, anything you have, please call in on the number you've been given, and we'll work through it.
And you mentioned that local agencies have been checked in with. When not finding a match, is that what prompted wanting this national hotline number? Why was that created? Because this is happening very quickly.
Right, and the main thing was because tips have already been coming in from lots of other parts of the country, so we don't, it's just a number they can call from any part of the country, not just our local numbers that we already had. So it's just to ease in the investigation, to make it so anybody can call and not have to worry about, that 800 number doesn't work when you're not inside the state of Indiana. So in case somebody has an issue with making a long distance phone call, they don't have to. We're not saying that we expect or we think that this is a national issue. We're just saying we're keeping all doors open. So that just makes it easy for everybody.
And then to reiterate from yesterday, either of you can answer, but it was mentioned it's believed that this is recent and that this child probably hasn't been missing very long. Is that still the belief? Is that still the case?
Yeah, obviously, we're still waiting on the autopsy results. That part of the process is not in our hands. So once we have those answers, that can change the answer to that question. But at this time, we would believe it's going to be fairly recent, sometime within the past week.
Sergeant Hall's going off of that, what you mentioned, the autopsy, is that the reason why you have not elevated this to a homicide investigation yet?
Right. There's a lot of questions to be answered, and typically on any investigation like this, we're going to wait for those official answers from a doctor to say this is exactly what happened. We're not doctors. We're police and investigators, and we can all make assumptions, but that's not our job, to make those assumptions officially. We wait for the proper authorities to say this is the cause of death, this is the time of death, and then we can move forward from there. So.
Additionally, you mentioned some of the schools and people that you had called and talked to. You all have, kept the area that this happened in, kind of under wraps. Is that can you tell us if it is a residential area, or are there people in that area who may have been nearby when this happened? It's
a very rural area, heavily wooded area. There are not a lot of houses in the neighborhood. I mean, there are residents. It's, no place in Indiana do you go that you're that far away from somebody. And it was, again, as it stated in the news release, he was discovered a short distance off the road. So there were houses in the area. It's just due to the sensitivity of this investigation and for the integrity of the investigation, at this point we just feel it's best not to give that location out.
Yeah. Have you all been able to speak to the folks that did live in the houses that are relatively
Our detectives have done numerous canvasses and spoken with many people. Again, as part with any of our investigations, we would do a neighborhood canvas, and we can expand that canvas and make it bigger and bigger until we find the answers we're looking for, or get to a logical conclusion that we can't go out any further. It's not going to do us any good. But yeah, lots of people have been spoken with, neighbors. People in the area, just anybody that might have information that could have possibly seen something, we've already checked, or we're in the process of checking if we haven't already done so.
Is there a threat to anybody's safety that you're concerned about after finding the body? Anybody's safety here?
We don't have any information at this time to think that there would be any danger to the public. No.
It would seem that clothing, shoes, haircut, anything like that might help in identification. Is there anything you can tell us or can't?
Right.
Why you can't release that at
Right.
this point?
And again, within any investigation, sometimes it's best to keep the cards you have close to your chest. Not saying that there's anything jaw-dropping out there, but it's best at this point that investigators have chosen that it's best to withhold that information. We have said that the general physical description, including he does have a short haircut, slim build, approximately 4 feet tall, and somewhere between 5 and 8 years old. And that's our best estimate based on the facts that we have before us. Once the autopsy results come back, we might be able to adjust that and give a specific age or something like that. But again, we have to wait for those results, and we can't hurry that along. We have to wait for that ourselves. It's not like TV where it happens, overnight or within an hour. We have to sometimes wait days for some very pertinent information that's out of our hands.
Is there anything that you can say that would tell you whether the boy died in the area or had been brought to the area after he had already died?
At some point, we might be able to release more information as far as the specifics that were found and what's going on in the case, but at this point, the information that we've released is really all we can say.
What's the timeline as far as this is concerned? Are you guys looking like, hey, maybe if we get to a week, it might be harder to get the information we need? What's the
Right, and that'll be up to the investigators, and that's being discussed constantly, continually going over, what ifs, if this happens, if that happens, do we need to change anything? So those things are always going to be updated. If we come to a point where like, hey, we're not getting the results we need, we've gone so many days or so many hours without receiving the information we want, they could possibly choose to say we're going to release further information. That'll be up to the investigators, and obviously it's going to be how they see it as in the best interest of the case so that they can, get the truth without altering anything.
But at this time, we haven't reached that point.
Correct.
You kind of touched on this a little bit, but can you explain further, while you can't release a whole lot right now, why you guys are so convinced that somebody knows who this child is?
Just the age of the child, someone had to be a caregiver, somebody had to be watching after the child. This person wouldn't be staying somewhere living on their own. Therefore, someone knows something.
Again, it's a 5 to 8 year old boy. That's somebody obviously has to have somebody taking care of him. He has to get food from somebody, a bed to sleep in. So obviously somebody was doing that. And at this point, though, we don't know who that is, and we don't know who this child is. So again, the number one goal at this point in the investigation is to find the identity of this child. Once we get that information, things can drastically change, and that can totally change the direction of the investigation. But we need to find that information out. Somebody out there that's seeing this, hopefully will see this, knows about somebody that's missing, about a little boy, 5 to 8 years old, and they haven't seen him, and they can't, nobody's answering the questions as to where they are. Those people need to contact us, and they need to use that 800 number to contact us so we can keep everything coordinated, and all the officers and the investigators can get that information and handle it properly.
Are there any black boys between the ages of 5 and 8 missing in the state of Indiana right now?
Those are some instances we're looking into that, but nothing right now that's directly pointing at our incident.
I'm sure if you look at the missing children's clearinghouse list, somewhere in Indiana, that's the case. Obviously, if there's something that's a close match, that's already been looked into, or they're currently looking into it. But again, nothing to this point has matched up to say, oh, we think we might have, what we're looking for here. So that's why we're making this plea again for the public's help to say, spread this word. It very well likely could just be the fact that nobody knows yet and can't speak out. Again, we'd like to say, or we might assume that somebody somewhat local, but we don't know that. So it might be somebody in a state 2 or 3 states away who has the answer for us, or even further. Any other questions?
Just
Again,
a formality, can we get you to say and spell your name for us?
Oh, Matt Busick, Busick.
And that's 2 T's on the end.
Yes, sir.
Always got to check.
again, we understand, we know that there's, I've been asked a lot of questions over and over again, and, what about clothing, what about this? And we understand, and, we hope that we come to the point one day we can say, hey, this is what we've got, and we can give you more, but we're not going to do anything that we think could possibly jeopardize the case. And, it's early in the case. This is still the day after, basically, it started Saturday evening, it's now Monday, so it's still relatively early. We still don't have autopsy results. There's lots of things going on in the background. Lots of things. It's a very in-depth investigation. So just ask people to, if they have information at this point, if anybody wants to help, obviously that help is to help us identify this boy.
And are those autopsy reports expected tomorrow still?
As far as the information that I have is it's still scheduled for tomorrow, so I would assume that those results would come back tomorrow at some
Well,
point.
it's scheduled for the autopsy. The results may be a couple days still.
Well, the full results
The full
obviously
results.
will take more than one day.
Is that being performed by the Washington County Coroner?
It's performed at the Washington County Coroner's Office, but it'll be a medical examiner coming in to do so.
Anything else? again, we just appreciate your help pushing this out there. We don't want it to fall out of the spotlight. We want that call, that tip to come in that gives us the answers that we're looking for. That's the biggest point. That's the biggest thing we can say right now. Somebody's taking care of this child. Somebody somewhere knows something. Once we can identify this child, that's drastically going to change everything, and that's the information we need right now. Somebody can do it. Thank you.